WECT News.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for watching. I'm Frances Weller.
And I'm John Evans. Tonight we're continuing our coverage of a story that has rocked this entire country. The manhunt is on for the gunman who shot and killed conservative activist Charlie Kirk.
The shooting happened as Kirk spoke on the campus of Utah Valley University. His murder raising fears about retaliation and concerns about the recent rise of political violence. WECT's J.C. Caldwell talking with local political leaders about the shooting. J.C., what do they have to say?
Well, Fran and John, although they may disagree on politics, both the New Hanover Republican and Democratic chairs say this was a horrific thing to happen in our country, and political violence is never acceptable.
How many mass shooters there have been in America over the last 10 years?
Counting or not counting gang violence?
Great.
The terrifying moment. A gunshot rang out on Wednesday at Utah Valley University, hitting and killing Charlie Kirk, a well-known conservative activist.
We saw him fall backward, blood shooting out of his neck, hit the floor, and we just had to bolt it out of there.
The shooter still on the run, but investigators have what they believe to be his picture, the rifle he used, even a footprint found in the woods near campus.
We will not stand for what happened yesterday. We are exhausting every lead. We have every officer invested in this.
Meanwhile, politicians here in New Hanover County are united in speaking out against political violence.
It's just really traumatic and it saddens my heart. There's no place for political violence in a free society like America.
John Hinnant is the New Hanover County Republican chair. He says no matter your political views, what happened Wednesday should trouble all of us.
We as Americans, especially of voting age, we need to be mature enough to handle our discourse in a civil manner. Political violence is never acceptable.
New Hanover County Democratic Chair Jill Hopman agrees and says Americans need to change.
Anything like this that puts fear in people for participating in democracy, this thing we all love more than partisan interests. It's horrifying, it's disappointing, it is something that we all have to do a better job to tone the temperature down in politics overall.
Kirk was well known to visit college campuses and welcomed debate on a range of topics, just as he did on Wednesday.
I want to be very clear that this is a political assassination.
Though he never visited UNCW, college Democratic and Republican groups on campus wrote a joint statement condemning his murder. UNCW is already preparing for a visit from Mike Pence next month, saying safety will always be the #1 priority. Hopman and Hinnant say our safety starts with respect for differing beliefs.
We can't allow people to suffer at the hands of evil.
This is just tragic and senseless.
As for Kirk, President Trump announced he will receive the Presidential Medal of Freedom, and Kirk's body will be flown from Utah to his home in Arizona on Air Force 2. J.C. Caldwell, WECT News.